Hello. Hi. Forgot to put the mics in. Oh dear. All right, I'm charging the phone. That's why. That would explain the part where I forgot the mics. I only have the one. How we do? Oh wait. I had to ditch the bike. That's a certain point, depending on how that goes. Hello. I would like to see a live chat. Have they added any features here to let me see the chat bigger? I would love that. I don't think they did. That's deeply unfortunate. I'm gonna have to wander back and forth here. But, you know, we'll make do. Whoa. So I started to mulch this mask with the halberd for a video. That's not looking good. There is like nothing left. There is nothing left this poor thing. But it's a decent enough target still, all the same, even though it's utterly mulched. How's everybody doing? It doesn't even look like a, it's so misshapen now. Delightful. What fun. I have a few things out today. Namely, the new Saber I got. I guess this is the first anybody's seen of the Saber, aside from my channel subscribers, I suppose. I think I posted for the channel subscribers a picture of the new Saber, but I don't think anybody else has seen the new Saber yet. This is the first video showing the new Saber. So here you go. Here's the new Saber I got. It is a S2 Krieger, Krieger Historical Fencing S2 Saber. It flows very nicely. I enjoy it a lot. How long? I'm not sure. It's this long. I don't know. Here, I know the length of my long sword. So we'll go off of that. My long sword is has a 95 centimeter blade. That is, so my long sword's 95 centimeters. The saber is maybe like 90 centimeters. Might be about 90 centimeters on this. I'm not sure. I'll find out, I guess. I'm doing all right. What's my favorite one-handed weapon that I've used? Favorite one-handed. I think side sword. I think this is fun. The sabers are very fun. I do find sabers entertaining, but they're not really my thing. But they are fun. I think like saber fighting is the most amusing. Like I'm a longsword guy, and when I'm not doing longsword, I'm doing side sword. But I have to say, like, saber on saber fighting is it's just fun. It's just good fun. It's not something that I have much of a keen interest in pursuing, but it's just good fun. Ugh. Get my sword stand out. There we go. We play some bind work here. I was working on one of Meyer's plays. The play he gives as an example play to Vinden, which I've been trying to wrap my head around a little bit, that example play, because he doesn't really specify the footwork in that play at all. I've been trying to figure out how to best arrive at the results he's looking for, which is something like here. That's a bit low, but I think we can kind of, I guess I could raise it. But no, raising it's a pain because I have to do this is good enough. This is, here. I can talk through it. So the play goes, somebody throws an Overh at you. You respond to the Overh with a Zwerkow. From the Zwerkow, let's gotta get the pressure. So from the Zwerkow, he says that you then strike through with the short edge deep at their head. While staying strong underneath them in the bind. That part's important. So this is like the whole HEMA thing, right? Is trying to piece together what they're talking about, going from their text. Now, of course, other people have done it, but my personal project has been, I've been trying to work through Meyer and come to conclusions with as little outside input as I can, just to see if I can, and then once I've gotten to a point where I'm like, I think this works, then I've been like checking how other people have been approaching the plays. And sometimes I realize, sometimes I find that I got it exactly right according to other people. And other times I realize, oh no, that makes way more sense. But the specifically Meyer's example play for Vinden was what I was working on today. So the way the play goes is that they throw an Overh at your head. You respond to the Overh by throwing a Zwerkow underneath it. The moment they clash, you wind your, because it's the Vinden play, you wind your short edge through to flick at their head. Now, the flick, as I've been trying, like, basically what makes this weird is the fact that it's a Zwerkow from the right, which is a short edge cut, not a long edge cut. Zwerkow from the left is a long edge, Zwerkow from the right is a short edge cut. And he says, we strike with our short edge. So somehow we have to go from having made this cut to flicking a short edge cut in at their head. I think it's a full wind, right? It's the wind play. I think of it as being a full wind through, because he talks about shooting the pommel through underneath our arm. So I think that's how we get that flick cut, because he calls it just a flick. A flick for him is nothing more than a flick. It's not like, there's not some depth to it. It's just a flick is a flick. I think it's Schnellen. I think that's the German. But it's just a flicking action here. It's meant to provoke, harass. Like, you don't want to get hit by that, obviously. It's going to hurt, right? Somebody flicks the tip of a sword onto your head. Ow. But that's the essential idea here. Is we have displaced the Overh. We go and we flick our short edge in like that. So we make the flick, and then a couple things can happen. So if we get the flick, or we start to do the flick, and we realize they're going to offset it, so they start to push us offline, then we give up, and we come through with another Zwerkow. That's one. The alternative is the Dirk Vinden play, which is the one I was specifically working on today, which is where after we've made the Zwerkow and we started to do the flick, they presumably try to set us aside, and then from here, this is where it gets weird, is we do something that you normally say don't do this. You step with your right foot through to their right side. So we are basically crossing them and almost giving them our back, almost, not quite. But I think that's why the flick is so important here, because we have done the flick. So we did the Zwerkow, which means that we have forced a strong bind here, and we flick to force them to parry even wider. That's what's important here, is that flick pulls this bind out here. And while the bind's out here, I have space to work over here. So then I step through with the right to the right side into here. Then I break free from their sword and I cut back down through. I basically rip down through and withdraw on the same action. So doing that whole sequence there is wherever we are, we do the Zwer to defend ourselves. We throw the flick, they parry off to the side. I go 1, 2, there. So flick, boom, boom, boom is kind of the idea there. So that's where I'm at. I don't know how right I have that interpretation yet, but it feels pretty good. Let's check the chat here. I was kind of going on that for a bit longer than I meant to, that tangent. Oh yeah, I totally derailed from my favorite one-handed sword. The favorite one-handed sword that I've used, yeah, it's a side sword, I would say. That's my favorite. Because side swords give you that like fun kind of saber vibe, but then you also have some of the rapier stuff. So it's like you get a little bit of the saber, you get a little bit of the rapier. It's like the best of both worlds. I really like side swords. Katanas are fine. They don't really do much for me personally. But I prefer to spar with a rapier or a saber. I think saber sparring is more fun. Rapier feels really cool. Like you feel like, yeah, I got this. But like as far as just like her, smash, fun, saber's more fun. One more question. Where's its center of mass? I assume that was on the saber. Sorry, I got super derailed on my tangent there. Let's see, point of balance. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna say point of balance here is right about. It's hard because it's a curved sword. I'm gonna say it's probably right about here. This is probably the point of balance. It's flipping side to side, but it's not really tipping back and forth. So I think that's about it. Archery is cool. I used to do archery a lot, actually. I was a big fan of doing archery. I just didn't keep up with it after college. But I really like archery. Any thoughts on the Hanwei Tinker longsword fuller going into the Tang? I'm not familiar with that particular one, especially not with the fuller going into the Tang like that. I'm not quite like, I don't know. I mean, I don't see it as being an issue, but I can't think of anything in particular. I don't have any particular thoughts on it. Oh, thank you, Chris Taylor. Name a car for an edit. A Beetle. I like Beetles. Like a good Beetle convertible. I like a good Beetle convertible. Or maybe like a Duesenberg. If you want to go really old, Duesenberg. Oh, thank you, David. Is there any reason why I prefer Meyer versus Lichtenauer? Mostly because I did Lichtenauer stuff for like 9 years and I wanted to do something different. That's kind of why. Can I show the Overh? Sure, yeah. And then somebody wanted a basic. Is that rust already? Oh, my brand new sail dagger already has a bit of rust on it from, I guess, from where it was being transported. Just a little tiny hazing of rust. I'm gonna have to deal with that. But my rapier's rusty too, so yes, it is what it is. Anyways, okay. So somebody wanted an Overh, basic Overh. So it kind of depends. The basic Overh is going to be one of those things that sort of depends on context of source. So Meyer describes the Overh as a vertical line cut, as opposed to a Zornhau, which is a diagonal line cut. But then, depending on what you're referencing, it could be that Overh is any descending cut regardless of angle, and then any Unterhau are any ascending cuts regardless of angle. That's usually how most people refer to Overh. Is you can have a vertical Overh, you can have a diagonal Overh. You know, anything, once you get to horizontal, then you get to middle how. But anything descending, regardless of the exact angle, generally gets referred to as an Overh. But essentially, like your basic, your like super bog standard Meyer Overh, straight down the middle. It's just like that. It's your like base. It's like your super basic kendo cut, right? It's that's your Meyery Overh situation like that. Very, very straightforward, right? And shredding the mask even further. Then your diagonal Overh, which Meyer puts in the group categorizes as the Zornhau line, comes in at that angle. The Zornhau is the Wrath cut because it is the strongest cut you have. A purely vertical Overh can get a bit of energy out of the hips, but it's a lot of drop, but you're not getting a lot of rotational energy out of it. It's still a very powerful cut, but it is not the most powerful cut. The most powerful cut you can do is that diagonal Zornhau line, because that's getting the body weight drop, the forward momentum of a passing step, plus the rotational energy of your hips opening and closing. So you're getting that energy, you're getting that energy, all that energy combining. So it's your single strongest cut that you can do, the Zornhau line. Someone was asking, what does a basic longsword stance look like from side view? Here, let me get over here. Basic longsword. So like, it depends on what your basic longsword stance is, right? Because there are different stances. I feel like, to me personally, the most basic thing is some sort of point on position. I generally regard this as being about as neutral a position as you could possibly take, personally. And this can take a few forms, right? You can have one that's pulling the hands back. This will keep your hands safer, but you're not taking as much space. Or you can do the opposite and extend it as far out as you can. And this would be like a long point. Meyer's long point is described as being held at the face, but basically any sort of arms extended point forward is your long point. Hands down, point out, gets you into your plow positions or your Eisenport, or whatever you want from Italian systems. That's super bog standard type stuff, right? It's just holding the point forward on either side. I feel like that's pretty standard. Other basic positions from the side would be any sort of shouldered guard, your Vomtag, your Zornhut, your Posta di Donna, whatever you want. Just something up, held up at the shoulders. I feel like that covers your like two most super duper basic. And then if we want to keep going with the German stuff, you've got Overh held down here, so any sort of low position, boar's tooth, whatever, and then any sort of hanging point position, regardless of if it's flat forward, edge forward, whatever, something held up above the head. Thank you, Jen. I like Mustache too. I don't have any broadswords, not like the basket hilted ones anyways. What stance style works for all swords? For all swords, I feel like, yeah, just again, like I was talking earlier, right? Like you don't get much more neutrally balanced as far as guards go than just put the point in front of you and then hold it. Like this is as intrinsically basic as it gets. It doesn't matter if you have a long sword, if you have a saber, or a rapier, right? Like just put the point forward, hold the hand, not necessarily there, but like just get the blade covering you and get behind the blade. That is as universal and basic as it gets, as far as the sword alone goes. I do still like Descent leather. I bring out the bill hook. I've given them some constructive feedback on the bill hook. I don't know where they're at with it right now. I had some issues with the hook of the bill hook was a little too flexible in that you can't actually use it. It'll just flex. So like you can't hook anything with it because the hook will just bend and you'll just slip, which is kind of a big deal when you're using a bill hook, right? So I gave them that feedback. I haven't heard back on if they've updated that design yet. The poleaxe, on the other hand, the poleaxe I have from them, I love. I have no real complaints about that one. That one works great. So I don't know where they're at with the bill hook. I hope they are able to innovate on that design and get it working a bit better. The poleaxe I have from them, I have no complaints. I really like it. What's the ideal material for weapons? Depends on what you want it to do. A high carbon steel usually works pretty well, though. That's if you can get a nice high carbon spring steel situation going, that's pretty solid. What do you think about the USM 1860 Saber for SEA? I've never used one. I've never used the 1860. I don't know. It seems, I mean, any sort of like modernish Saber design, I think they all kind of, I mean, obviously, like to Saber aficionados, there's going to be a difference, just like there are differences with longswords to longsword aficionados. But I think you'd be hard pressed to go wrong with a Saber model made as a sparring weapon. I think there's, you know, there's not enough of a difference between them to like be totally put out by using one. All right, Shokte. Thank you for the donation, Shokte. Also, a movie suggestion: Zato Ichi Challenged. I haven't heard that one, but I do like watching old samurai cinema. I really like samurai, like classic samurai cinema, because the sword fighting in it is usually like, I think of the sword fighting we get in movies, samurai cinema tends to be the closest, I think, to actual swordsmanship on screen. There are some like standouts outside of Japan that are really good, but I think for the most part, looking at the old samurai fighting, the sword fighting is like the spear fight in Hidden Fortress. Yeah, not even sword fight, but like the spear fight in Hidden Fortress is really good. I like that one a lot. Oh, boys, can I show the move where you go around the opponent's guard and hit their head from behind? Yeah, I can do that one. This one is, yeah, also like, again, for reference, I'm not keeping up with the live chat because I can't read it from back here. So for people in the stream, if you've asked questions, I am reading my way down, okay? If it gets too far backlogged, I'll skip ahead or speed read. But for the most part, I am working my way question by question. So if you ask the question, just think about where you are in the queue, and I'll try to get to it. Right. So the one where you get that short edge Overh where we can flick around the guard is Meyer describes it as a Sturzhau. So it's a plunging cut. It's a cut that we deliver with the back edge of our sword. So what I'm doing here is I am turning the sword backwards, because if I go in with the lead edge, I stall out. But if I go with the back edge, I can wrap around and still hit. So if they're making a parry, if I can provoke them, if they're, this isn't a great one to use against somebody who's going to attack you who's going to countercut, because if they countercut at me as I do this, I'm liable to eat a double. But if I'm fighting somebody who is prone to defense, especially if I've been able to kind of like force into the defense, maybe I've like just sort of done this sort of little like flicky, you know, I'm just harassing them, right? Trying to get them primed to defend. Or maybe I start to really threaten a cut. You know, whatever it takes to psychologically prime them to not cut me, but instead to defend when I make a move. That's what I'm trying to do here. Is if I can prime that, and I reasonably know that they're going to try to parry my cut instead of try to cut me, that's when I can start to get really sneaky with it. So I can throw it and change through at the last second. So it comes in looking like it's a normal cut. That's why sneaking it around works. because the person seeing it sees this cut. So they're trying to parry that. But at the last second, you twist the sword, you shoot the pommel through underneath your arm and invert the blade, and you crack through with the back edge. And that's how you sneak past their parry and manage to hit them through their guard. So hopefully that answers that part. What is the best all-around beginner sword? I mean, we in the HEMA sphere, we usually start people on long swords. I don't know, like, I'm not entirely sure if that's necessarily the easiest one to start with. If you want to like self-learn, sort of, Saber is probably your best bet, because you can get a lot from Olympic, like any Olympic resources would be super helpful to you. But also we have relatively modern fencing manuals written for the express purpose of teaching people who have no idea how to sword fight relatively quickly. And those manuals are meant that, like, they're not just like teaching guides for the person teaching. Like, you're supposed to, like, there's an expectation that you can use these study guides as a way to sort of have a crash course in sword fighting. And they teach you the super duper duper ultra fundamental stuff to get you fighting at least competently very quickly. So I think Saber might be the easiest place to actually start. Any longsword drills you can do if you don't have a sword? Footwork. Nothing but footwork. Lots of footwork. The problem is, if you've never done the footwork stuff, if you start doing the footwork stuff wrong, that's also bad. But you can never do enough footwork. Just make sure you're practicing the footwork correctly. You might want to, you know, if you don't have anybody around who can help you, you might want to like record your footwork practice and then send it to be peer reviewed, and maybe get some feedback from them, you know, like on the HEMA Discord or something. Hey, my videos are super nice. How do you time your opponents better? How do I time my opponents better? I'm going to need you to elaborate on that. There are a couple ways I could read that. I'm not sure. Do you have any advice for dealing with fighters who constantly shrink backwards and countercut? If you know there's a trap, spring the trap. Yeah, if they're sitting there primed, if they are sitting there primed with a trap, you need to find a way to trip that trap without committing to it. So trying to pressure them in a way that they have to give up the trap and then try to play off of that. So, you know, it could be stuff like, you know, this is just spitballing, because everybody, you know, different fighters require different solutions, even if they're counter punching. They sometimes, or alternatively, you can just wait them out if you want. Like, if they want to play the counter punch game, then like be like, okay, you go, I'll wait. That's, your mileage may vary on that one, but sometimes that works. But you know, if they're sitting there waiting, you can try to like just give them harassing little like this kind of stuff. You know, just shooting the point at them. Targeting at their face is probably more likely to provoke them than targeting elsewhere. You're not trying to hit them necessarily. You're just trying to get them to do something. Because if they're sitting there in a counter, if they're sitting there waiting for you, pretty much the worst thing you can do is to try to just hit them. That's what they want. If they're sitting there waiting to counterpunch you, they want you to hit them or try to hit them. So we don't do that. Instead, we harass them until we've given them enough of a bait that they bite, and they try to do whatever they're going to do, and you watch, because what you don't do when you're triggering this is you don't go provoke and then immediately hit, because you're going to eat whatever trap they just, like, you might hit them, but you're going to eat the trap that they prepared. Instead, you are just trying to get them to bite, and you watch and you wait for whatever trap they spring, defend it, then act. You're just trying to draw them out of their position. And once you've gotten them drawn out, that's when you can start getting, once they're out of their counter posture, that's when you can start tripping them up with mix-ups and stuff, right? So that's where like your freaky little feints can come in and all that kind of fun stuff. You just have to get them out of it first. Any moves that seem harder than they are. Ooh. Duplarin? I feel like Duplarin's harder than it. Like Duplarin is basically, we have come into a bind. They're giving me pressure this way. I cut in the bind. It's a super, super useful cut. It's so useful because it allows you to cut their other side without leaving. Because anytime you leave the bind, it takes time to get from one side to the other. It leaves their sword potentially somewhere where they can hurt you. Just a whole lot of stuff. But if you can use their displacing energy to cut them safely, that's amazing. And the dynamic of doing a Duplarin is super simple. Because all it is in the bind, they're giving that lateral pressure there. So you turn, you pivot, you're using the fact that they're pushing on your sword this way. So you turn that sword, they're pushing, you lay your sword here, they keep pushing, boom, through. It is so simple. And yet, I could probably count on one hand the number of times I've pulled it off in sparring. It is a very elusive one for me. I've done it a couple times, but the context of like getting it to happen, I don't know. I can do it in drills, fine. There's just something. It happens at a very particular sweet spot because it doesn't happen here. Duplarin, this isn't Duplarin time. Duplarin is here. It's not here. I mean, you can kind of do it from here, but it's not really here. It's here. And fights don't stay here very long. They'll stay here and they'll stay here, but they don't stay here. When they're here, they either come back to here or they get to here, or they're all this funky stuff out here, right? Very seldomly do I get fights that stay in this space long enough for that Duplarin to like really open itself to me. And skill issue, like I make no excuses. It's a skill issue. But yeah, I don't know. Duplarin has always eluded me in a reliable sparring context. The mustache takes. See, like seriously, you have to stick with it. I guess it's when people say it takes like 4 months to grow in a mustache, they're not lying. It's 4 months. You have to commit to it. There's going to be, and I'm still not quite happy with how like this side's being weird. I've got like a gap. This side grew in way better. This side's weird. But yeah, when they say 4 months, it's 4 months, and you have to get through 3 months of it looking really icky. It just doesn't look good for 3 months, and then the 4th month hits, and you're like, oh, it's a mustache now. There's a period at the start where it looks pretty good because you just have to really like it's basically just stubble, and that looks okay, and then it grows in past the stubble phase that looks okay, and then it looks kind of icky, and then you have to stick with it for a few months and then grow it. Some people say that it's better to just grow. If you want to grow a mustache, you just grow everything because that looks better than a icky mustache. You grow everything in and then you shave off the beard and you leave the mustache. But I didn't do that because I can't grow a beard. I have not been contacted to be the next this next Superman. No, I'm Spay. Oh, thank you, Black Adder. Do I have any good recommendations on where to buy armor? Not really. Armor is tricky. Swords are one thing. Armor is very complicated, and I just, as a general rule, I don't make recommendations on armor. It's a very difficult thing. Yeah, I've actually got some halberd sleepy leap. I actually have some halberd-ish content coming up next week, actually. So yeah, I record videos based on flights of fancy. So sometimes I like stuff. Sometimes I'm hooked on a topic and I do stuff, and then other times I don't care. I vary. I have watched Seven Samurai. I do enjoy Seven Samurai. What I like about Seven Samurai is that it like some of the sword fighting doesn't feel particularly competent, but it does feel real in that it's like they gave people swords and they're like ruin each other and they're just kind of going at it and it's like yeah okay like it feels real. What's the benefit of a light fetter versus a heavier, thicker fetter? So lighter fetter, well, really important benefit of a lighter fetter is that it's nicer to your opponent. You know, if you hit somebody with a light fetter, their gear's going to take that hit better than the heavy fetter. A heavy fetter has more mass behind it. It's going to be meaner on the hit. Another benefit, a lighter fetter is quicker to maneuver. Right? So like if I have a heavy fetter and I make a cut, it's going to take me that much longer to like pull it back and come back again. A light fetter, zip zap zoop, right? The advantage to the heavy fetter, one is that if you really don't like your partner and you want to concuss them, well, there you go. Terrible reason for you to pick one, a heavy one. Now the actual like good benefit to a heavy fetter is that it has the increased mass means that it has more bind presence. This is kind of a chunky fetter. I don't use it anymore. This fetter is way too beefy. It's not allowed at a lot of tournaments around here. This thing is meaty. This one is pretty light. But it means that when these two swords interact with each other, the heavy fetter is much harder to move around than like for me to displace. It's harder for me to move this thing around than if I had the heavy fetter and I was hitting this thing around. This thing would be so much easier to move around. So when it comes to blade on blade interaction, it's easier for the heavy fetter to get the displacements, and it's harder for the light fetter to displace the heavy fetter. That's the number one advantage to having a heavy fetter, is that you're just harder. You tend to win binds more easily. Is dual better or in single? If we're doing like one-on-one, no armor rules, and you know how to dual wield, that's going to be a pretty distinct advantage over somebody who's just using like a sword, like one sword in one hand. A sword in two hands versus two swords, assuming equal competence by all parties. I think I might still give it to the two sword. I'm not sure. It's complicated. Depends on the lengths of the swords and everything. But using two swords well is very hard. So if we are talking novices, and one of them has two swords and one of them has one sword, and I'm probably going to give it to the person with the one sword, because the moment you have two swords and you don't know what you're doing with two swords, you're going to start making dumb mistakes. Is there a good way to parry a strike from a polearm or large weapon when using two short swords? So this kind of there's a lot of iffiness here. I feel like your best bet is to try to get the double grab there. That's your best. So I would not say do the like cross one, because you're even crossed up, you're still going to be at something of a leverage disadvantage. I think if you really want to try to make the two short little stubby things work against the polearm, you're looking to get those you want to like double up, and you want to get these sort of barring actions. So, and that's easier said than done. I fully admit it's easier said than done. But your best bet is to try to get these sort of doubled up controls over the polearm. You're completely outranged. You are pretty heavily outmatched as far as just armament goes. Your best bet is to try to get that doubled up control, barring on their polearm, and then close past the head. Do I ever use... What's the best tips I can give to a beginner? Don't cross your center. Don't cross your center line. People like to like. I love it when I'm reading books and stuff. They're like, control the center. You don't let blah 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 blah. It's like it's such an easy word to throw out there, but it's for a good reason, right? So one thing that I see people who start out do, especially if they play video games, I've done a whole video on this about how the video game parry is garbage. This is terrible. This is so bad. This doesn't work. It's I admit, I fully admit that there is a reason why, a good reason why it gets used in video games, because like this doesn't look offensive, this looks defensive, and it looks defensive, like, you know, however, if you're looking like top down, if you're looking forward, you're looking from the side, from the back, it looks like you're trying to protect yourself. I get that. It makes sense. But if you're actually trying to sword fight, it's terrible. It's useless. It's garbage. This is so bad. This is terrible. Never do this. Unless you're trying to bait something, I guess. If you want to like intentionally provoke something, then that's different. You know, being knowingly bad is different. But being bad without knowing what you're doing, that's what we're trying to avoid here. So when it comes to trying to protect yourself, don't let this happen. So I'm going to try to like walk us through why this is bad. So when it comes to using a sword alone, we have conceptually, the German system conceptualizes 4 quarters. So you split the torso basically at the sternum, boom. So straight down the middle. Here, I'm wearing a shirt, right? I have a shirt that basically gives us the quarters. So straight down the middle and across, kind of like across the waist or ish, right around here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. When you're defending yourself with a sword, you can essentially close 2-ish quarters at any time. Ish. Sometimes it's like 1, but generally speaking, you are closing is kinda 2-ish at a time. 1.5. Let's say 1.5. 1.5 quarters at a time. So what happens when you cross the quarters like this? You are no longer actually protecting any of them, because we have to remember, they're trying to cut or stab us. Stabbing, defending against thrusts means that you have to displace, because you're not blocking a thrust. Like you don't like block. You have to move. You have to get it out of the way. So that's a totally different thing. As far as cuts go, defending yourself against cuts is about putting your sword as a barrier that intercepts the blow before it gets to you. So if I am holding my sword here, any cut thrown to here is going to be caught by my sword before it reaches me. It's going to end up hitting the sword here. Likewise, if I come to this side, I'm now being covered. My sword will intercept blows here. If I come up here or here, sword will intercept the blow before it reaches me. But if I come here, if I'm blocking here, I'm not closing any angle. My sword is projecting to this upper, what is this? My left, yeah, my upper left quarter here. It's projecting into the space, but it is not actually closing any of the attack lines to that shoulder. It's not like this, right? If it's here, hits the sword. If it's here, goes past the sword. Unless they get like really unlucky and they manage to like hit dead on the tip somehow. Maybe. Likewise, anything here, my sword's not high enough. It's not closing, so I get hit. So that's the number one thing, defensively speaking, that I would advise when it comes to trying to like do sword stuff for the first time, is don't ever cross, because it's really easy for people to do that. People will do that all the time. I correct people constantly. It is such a hard idea, because they feel like keeping the sword in this space keeps them safer. They feel safe because they're like hiding behind it, right? But you have to close, not just hide behind it. It's not a shield, right? It's not going to keep you safe like that. It's not going to just block stuff. You have to put it in the right place. So Usually they don't do like the video game block, but they will do this and this. And this is just as bad because it still leaves everything open. So when I'm fencing somebody and I see, like if I'm in like at a tournament and I'm fighting somebody new-ish and they do this, it's just like, okay, I'm just gonna come right here. That's the moment I see this opening here, I'm like, okay, I will just boom in. So long-winded way to say, if you're going to protect yourself, I either get the sword on the sides or keep the sword centered and then turn the hips. Because keeping the sword centered and shifting the hips achieves the same result. Because if you look, my quarters, sword is intercepting those blows that way. And if I get the sword over here, I can catch. It gets more complicated because this is like easier to read. You have to think about the fact that the sword's projecting. That part's important. So it's again, there's a reason why people have trouble with this. It can be hard to wrap your head around. Here, just because I really want to make sure I drive that particular point about why that keeps us safe. So it's about where that sword intercepts. So if this sword is trying to cut me, now this is weird. This isn't really the angle. Maybe like if I get it like this, it doesn't hit the angle right. But the idea being that I can basically turn. So by turning, I can make that contact happen there, and then it gets shunted away. So that's the difference between the full close, or I can get behind the blade, and then the setting it aside thing. It's you're catching and you're kind of like going like, get that out of here, get that out of here. So that's the difference there. Other than that, other advice, thrusts are good, but don't thrust unless you have their sword. Another super duper common rookie mistake is they start to understand quarters, and so they start to attack the opening. But the number one thing that beginners who just realized how quarters work and how they can stab is that they'll be fighting here and they see their opponent somewhere like this. They see that this is open. They go, oh, they're open down here. Dead. This happens all the time. This is so, they do it all the time. They see the opening, they chase the opening, they forget that there's another sword. So they chase the opening, boom, dead. Terrible, don't do that. Don't thrust unless you are in contact with their sword. Just don't even do it. Can you parry into a shoulder bash like For Honor? I mean, yeah, but no, but like yeah, but why bother? I guess is kind of why bother. That's my answer. Why bother? Like, could I like parry something and shoulder checks? Sure, yeah, I guess. Like I don't know, I could do that, right? That's probably the most obvious thing I can think of is that I'm building off of a play here. So here's the hypothetical here. Why bother is my answer, but here's why I say why bother, right? So if I wanted to shoulder bash from like here, I got to here and I checked this and I shoulder bash in, okay, fine, I shoulder bashed, but why? Because you know what else I could have done? As soon as I got to here, whoop, if I catch it, as soon as I get to here, I can hit. I can just hit with the sword. That's an option. You know, I can go shunt, boom, hit, boom, there. Or I can, let me just shift this camera here a little bit. So if I get that, I can also go boom, check, boom, right there. That is going to hit so much harder than my shoulder ever will. I can just pummel right to the face. That's going to work better. If I want to keep them alive, still, why would I shoulder bash? Because if I want to like make them submit, I'm going to go for the grapple. I'm gonna like lay hands on here. I'm gonna try to get them to the ground. Shoulder bashing is just gonna kind of push them, right? So like you could, but why? I'm not saying that there aren't ever times to like shoulder check somebody, but there are usually way better options available. Where am I going? Okay, here we go. Have I tried machete fighting? I mean, I've done messer fighting, which is basically a machete. So my impression of machete fighting vis-a-vis messer fighting is that it is a bloody, terrible thing that I would never want to be a part of. They are short enough to be terrible, terrible things. There's like the shorter the weapon is, the closer you get to the person while you're fighting, the harder and less time you have to respond. That's like knife fighting is terrible, right? Like somebody, actually, I have my dagger. I have a dagger here, right? Like something like this. Like this is terrible. Your odds of like reacting to this thing coming at you, it's just not good. This thing is super dangerous. I would never want to get into a dagger fight with some. Oh my gosh, no, thank you. Like I practice with daggers, and I would not ever like willingly get into a dagger fight with some. No way. I will like if you said I have to fight to the death, and I get to choose, I'm never picking daggers, ever. No. I'll take any of these other ones before I take a dagger. No. And so messers aren't far removed from that. They're not that much bigger. Same sort of terribleness with short infighting weapons. They are brutal. How to do better at binds? That is, I think, too expansive an idea to even to start touching on. Honestly, there's so much nuance to bind work. If I could give one general piece of advice about being better with bind work, is you are probably squeezing too much. You are probably too strong. Now let me get back over here. Bind work, good bind work is all about like subtlety, right? It's about that feeling. It's about the feeling. It's knowing to get back and forth. All that stuff. And I think most people. Okay. And let's get that plugged in. Oh boy, my phone got down to 8%. Woo, that was close. I've got a portable charger though, so we've switched off the lapel mic to the thingy, but now my voice is not going to be as clear. Yeah, I'm just gonna, so I can stay closer, I'm gonna just do the pairing dagger. So I would say, generally speaking, you're probably, like, the number one thing I could say about getting better at binding is make sure you're not squeezing too much. There are times to squeeze, but just make sure you're not too pushy. The more you squeeze, the less finesse you can feel. Like being able, like your ability to tell pressure difference when you're like versus when you're like just sort of like this, right? Totally different. So just try squeezing less than you are now and see if things change for you. Beyond that, it's hard to say any one thing. It's such a complex topic. I look like I don't even eat. I don't eat honey. Not because I don't like honey. I just don't eat. I don't know. I never think about honey. It's weird. I don't know why. Welcome, Stardust. Contemporary fencing's fine. It doesn't particularly interest me, but it's fine. Do I have a Zweihander? Yeah. I was about to say no. I don't know why I was going to say no. Yes, I have one. What is that shirt? So it's a shirt. Yeah, I don't get it. Oh, thank you, Sleepy Leap, about the shorts. I mean to do more long form content, but it's one of those things where the rate of production I do, right? I post like once a weekday, like during the work week, right? That's 5 videos a week. That generally, like, the reason why I started making videos in the first place was because the shorts format was a thing, right? Starting with TikTok or whatever. I mean, I started on TikTok, right? When short format started to become a thing, I liked the Q&A format that it allowed, and I especially liked how short it was because it allowed me to very briefly touch on topics. Because I am super attention deficit words, ADHD, right? So like, my ability to focus on a subject long enough to do a long form content video and then be willing to edit it, that part's really important. Being willing to edit the long form content video is fleeting. I can absolutely ramble. I mean, I've been rambling for an hour now. I can ramble about a topic for long enough to fit a long form video, but editing it back down to where I like it, So maybe if I hire an editor, I'll start doing long form. I don't know. Maybe. What's my flashiest yet useful move? Ooh. Not one I can do here. I can like talk about it a little bit. No, I can't even talk about it. It makes me mad. Maybe if I loosen that up a lot. Maybe. The coolest move I've done is this really sick disarm. I'm gonna loosen this up here. I don't know how this is gonna work because I have to like wrench it out of the sand. The coolest disarm I know is you're together like this, and then it's super gutsy. I feel like there's reasonable ways to make blade grabs happen. Like, I'm using my forearm to get some fall out. But like, there are reasonable ways to make blade grabs happen, like by making palm to flat contact and then clamping. Like, I've held swords. I've never tried to, again, like, if I was in a sword fight for my life, yeah, I'd probably try a blade grab, right? Like, if I thought I had the blade grab, that's probably worth the risk to end the fight. That's the game you play, right? Everybody says, like, grabbing blades, you're just gonna cut your hand. Maybe, sure, that's a possibility. I'm not saying it's not. But if grabbing their sword means that you can end the fight right then and there, is probably a better gamble than letting them get another swing. That's the logic here, right? It's worth the risk usually. That said, this disarm is really cool, but it is the scariest blade grab I know, because not only do you grab their blade, not only do you grab your blade, you grab both blades at the same time. It is terrifying. I don't know how you get away with it without getting sliced. I don't know, but it's in the texts, and it's really cool, and it works really well, assuming you don't get your hand gashed open. But you get into a bind, you clamp both hands together, you clamp both hands over, you come through underneath their arm. So you get under their forearm, and you just wrench up and away, and you steal their sword clamped between your hands. So you come in, you get the, I'm gonna squeeze it back into there. So you make the bind, you let go with your hand, you come up, you grab both swords, shoot through underneath, get there, rip their sword out of their hand, and then threaten them with both swords at once. It's so cool. It's so cool. There's another one that is more feasible to like be able to confidently pull off. It's where you come in through here, and what makes this safe is that you, again, like the palm to flat contact, that part's really important. You come through, you wrap your hand around to the flat of their sword. So you're making flat wrist to flat contact. That part's important. Then you are hooking with your grip. So the grip of your sword is now on the edge of their blade. So their edge is going to probably bite into your handle. That's fine. That's the best thing here. We want their edge to bite into our handle, right? Because we don't want it to bite into our hand. So if it's biting into anything, handle's where we want it. And then you come through and you grab the underside of, you grab their pommel or the middle of their handle, wherever you can get a hand on their handle, and you crank it open and you pull through here. And what that does to them is, so you've got contact there, you've got contact somewhere here, and you're twisting it up to here, and once you've twisted enough, you can't keep holding onto the sword this way. So you crank it to here, and their hands just let go. They cannot hold on. It just pops right out. It's so cool. Okay, I'm gonna skip. Somebody donated, and I am way behind, so I'm gonna skip. Oh, I can just pull up the. Oh, thank you, Lincoln. You could have asked a question, but thank you. Thank you for the donation, Lincoln. I like that. There we go. How do I make it go away now? Okay. I am sorry, my other donor. You ask questions a lot though, so I forget that I can just tap on a question to make it pop up to skip ahead. Do I have any advice for dealing with very aggressive opponents? It depends on how they're aggressive. If they're aggressive recklessly, then counterpunch them. That's like, right? If they're just flying at you with no regard for their safety, counterpunching, mistying them. Counterpunching, okay, if they're flying at you with no regard for their safety whatsoever, counterpunching might not be a good choice because they're going to probably double you. Instead, space them out and get the quick hit and withdrawal. That works. Like somebody who's just kind of like boom, like that. That's the kind of person you go parry, 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 hit, withdraw. I don't know if I stepped too far away for that to pick up, but basically parry, parry, hit, withdraw. Like just pulling, just get out of there. They are going, because if they're just flying at you, they're just going for it. Every time they do something, there's a window to hit them. So you're just trying to stay alive long enough to get the space to pop, get out. Is probably going to be a hand hit. That's probably what you're going to be able to get against somebody who's super aggressive. If they're flying at you with cuts, their hands are out here. Parry, parry, take the hand, run away. Oh, hi, wifey. I am realizing I'm seeing what people are commenting on, and I'm realizing how far behind on the chat I am. Would I ever write a book for fencing in the future? I would need to feel a lot more confident in my own interpretations of stuff before I did that. You know, like, I have medals now. I have medals, but like, I am not. I don't know. I am neither in a place where I feel super confident in my own interpretations of texts, nor do I feel super confident in my competitive performance to feel like I am in a place to write a book on anything at the moment. But maybe. Again, it's also the attention thing. Books take a long time to write, and I don't know that I have the attention span to write a book. Dawnbreaker. Between those two, not really. It's so the idea is like hand and a half. Yeah, I'm trying to not get flagged. The B sword, not the the really bad B word. The like neutrally. I still don't want to get in trouble on. Yeah, not the really bad B word, but the less bad B word sword that I might still get flagged if I say on a live stream. Yeah, that one and a hand and a half sword and a long sword. These are all like super intermixy terms. They kind of mean the same thing, sort of ish. It's a very fluid thing. The idea here is that the B sword and then the hand and a half sword is that you have that it's halfway between being a two-handed sword and being a one-handed sword. That's the idea. So the hand and a half part specifically means having not enough hand, not having two hands worth, but literally having a hand and a half of handle. That's where that term comes from, is having just enough room for a hand and a half. So you end up with like that's where you get those like long handles, like the long one-handed handles where there's just enough room to get another hand on there. And so it's like a one-handed sword that you can get a second hand on. Long swords, as we kind of term them now, are swords that are like two-handed, but that can be used in one hand. Whereas the B sword tends to be B sword and long sword gets used interchangeably. I think like they tend to refer to like pretty much the exact same thing. B sword veers. Hand and a half sword tends to specifically refer to ones that have that hand and a half handle. The long sword and B sword terms get applied to both hand and a half swords and also full handled long swords that can be used in one hand or two. Okay, I'm going to try to move a little quickly here to the chat. Yes, the chat is live, Dawnbreaker. I'm just really far behind. Just zooming. What about those wrist slash guard things that make now? Oh yeah, that'd be interesting. That would make for an interesting sword. Like if we were like sword fighting now, having like like slice proof gloves and then like slash guards would as like part of your daily dress would be really interesting. I would be fascinated by a story that explores that. Like if we were like in a place like gun law control was like super big, but they still like were very Second Amendment-y kind of people were like they're like, oh yeah, guns, no, we don't like our society hates guns because like bang bang, we hate them. We all carry swords as our Second Amendment, right? Like if that was like that'd be a really fun sort of like fictional place set in a modern time and to play around with like modern answers to swords. That'd be really cool. That's a neat thought, Tekon. Thanks for asking about that. That's I'm gonna think about that later. How many duels have I actually won? To the death? None. I haven't died though. Do 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 do. Have I tried more aesthetic fencing? So yeah, we when we're doing demos at events, we are usually doing like aesthetic fencing. So we will deliberately not go for the easiest shots and we will try to set up more interesting stuff. And it takes this sort of like silent conversation between you and the other person to try to make that happen. But it does result in some pretty cool fighting. Yeah, the weather's great. Thank you, Uncle Antonio. I hope you find it enriching. I do. I've been meaning to do a video on Warmonger because the fact that she uses the gauntlet is very interesting. I have stuff to talk about. Fake and background. The background's fake? I have a fake background. Oh no. This is really pretty lighting though. What do you think about the house, huh? We have a new pergola. That's new. Oh my goodness. 20 bucks there. Pilot X asked, will you ever travel to Europe to a HEMA or medieval tourney with armor and represent the new world? Probably not with armor. Oh my goodness. That would be such a pain to transport. But maybe someday, maybe someday I'll do a HEMA tournament. Maybe. We'll find out. I would love to go abroad for some, like, I would love to, like, I don't know that I want to compete abroad. That sounds like, I personally find tournaments, like, obnoxiously stressful. There's a lot of, like, performance anxiety there. But, like, maybe for, like, a cool workshop. The one, except for the sword laws in London now. Oh my gosh. But, like, there's some really cool British, like, workshop type events that I'd love to attend. But, oh well. Oh man, am I actually about to catch up? I caught up with chat. It's incredible. I finally did it. I caught up. Hey, awesome. Your gear just got here. Good. I hope you enjoy it, Lincoln. What's my best sparring advice for beginners? I already covered a lot of it earlier. So the best sparring advice for beginners. I'm trying to think of any other sparring advice I gave. So I'm going to recap the other stuff I gave really fast. Basically, don't cross your body. Terrible. If you want to know why, other than the fact that this is super easy to, like, it doesn't actually protect anything. I did a whole ramble earlier. So that's the first one, is don't cross the body. Make sure when you're taking guards, you are actually closing lines, not opening them. The other one is don't thrust unless you have contact with their sword. Once you are used to fencing and stuff, there are times where you can thrust without contact on their blade because you know they're committed to something. But as a beginner, don't thrust unless you have control of their sword first. Just don't do it. It's bad. You'll double. I can tell you now, you're gonna double. Beyond that, get out. So get your hit, get out. That's the other one. Practice getting out. The best hit ever means nothing if you got hit back. So get the hit, pull away. Get the hit, pull away. Throw the cut. It didn't work. Pull away anyway. I don't care. Just get out of there. That's for beginners. You probably, like, when you're a beginner, you probably don't know, like, most beginners struggle to get past the, like, 1-2. They can do 1-2 and they short circuit and they don't know what else to do. So rather than going 1-2 short circuit, get hit, at least go 1-2 run away. When you get better, stop doing that. Right? When you get better, that's when you do the 1-2, watch, hit, boom, boom, then you get the flick, whatever, then get out. But when you're just starting out, boom, boom, withdraw. That'll last you a while. We're reading a book where a sword fight happened or a sword fight appears. What realistic? Oh, so someone said, if you're reading a book
and a sword fight happens, what would make you go? What would make me take notice? That happened actually. That happened. I was reading Pariah. So it's Dan Abnett's. He's a 40K writer, Dan Abnett. I've been reading through his Eisenhorn, Ravenor, etc. trilogy. Beckwin. I'm on Beckwin now. And in the second Beckwin book, there's a part where she gets into a sword fight with somebody, and she says she's defending herself while looking for a moment of a. I think he said, yeah, while waiting for a movement, for an opportunity to perform a movement of conclusion, and that made me go, "Excuse me? Did you just say movement of conclusion?" Movement of conclusion being a moment. Movement of conclusion being a moment. This comes from like rapier and stuff. So it's the moment where you can do some sort of whatever and force the end of the fight. Distressa ideal. The ideal Distressa outcome is that nobody dies. So the ideal movement of conclusion is that we have done something. We have secured their blade. Maybe we've gotten a grapple. We're presenting a threat of some sort, and we force their surrender. So in the fight, she's trying to take the guy alive. So, like, while defending herself, she's looking for an opportunity to get in and do the movement of conclusion to end the fight and take him alive. And then as soon as I read that line, I was like, Dan Abnett, you've been reading. Because that's not a term. Like, that's not a term people... And he used it correctly, right? He used it contextually, and like he knew what it meant. So, like, throwing terms like that out correctly, yeah, that makes me take notice. So the games with a short pike with a shield is fake? I don't know what you mean by that. Like, spear and shield's fine. There's nothing wrong with spear and shield. Do a tornado spin attack. Oh yeah, here we go. Two tornado spin. Yeah. Boom, boom. I did it. There you go. I was getting genuinely afraid I was going to hit the camera. I play 40K. So play 40K is a bit of a loose term. I have an Eldar army. I have an Eldar army. I picked them up back in... Gosh, what edition was it? I started playing Eldar back when their codex was blue, and it had the like one super glammed up like glam rock band, like Dire Avenger looking guy. I don't know what he actually was, because like his armor wasn't like like he was just like some glammed up crested. I say Dire Avenger because he had a crest, but I don't know what he was just a dude, right? Yeah, and he had like blue, and he had the jewels everywhere. It was just like the one guy, and he was doing like the pistol tucked into it. It was the whole thing. It was a long time ago. That's when I started. I was back in like 20. Before 2010. Before 2010. Long before 20, well before 2010, but yeah, that's when I started playing. But yeah, I don't really play. I like every couple years I play a game. Like I mostly just read the books and then play like the video games. And then I have an Eldar army, but that's about it. It's not even painted. At least I painted like half of it in like middle school, and then I never did more. How did I get into sword fighting? I was in college. I wanted to do fencing in college, but the fencing club was defunct when I got there. And then I found out about a HEMA club in the area, and then I joined them. How am I doing on battery now that I've got it plugged into the charger? It's going up slightly. Is the light spear the same as javelins? Like, I would say a javelin is a light spear, but I wouldn't say all light spears are javelins. The javelin is specifically like a spear weighted for throwing. So you could have a light spear that's not meant for throwing, but then a javelin by its nature is kind of a light spear. Yeah, the movement of conclusion is checkmate. Yeah, it's checkmate. So I want to circle back to the because I was reading through the chat. I wanted to circle back to the book thing. So so the movement of conclusion stuck out to me. I was like, hey, he's read stuff, and that works because in 40K, like 40K takes place in the future of our existence, more or less, right? So all of our history still happened. So movement of conclusion, like all these historical fencing terms, sure, like why not? But if you're in a fantasy setting, just straight porting fencing terms over might not be the best. So, like, depending on the setting of your book, either port the actual words over, translate the words, or use the concept of the word but change the word to something made up, something fantasy, right? You've seen the big guys training with the big swords. I mean, they're just like, I mean, more power to them. It's clearly working for them, but it's a fun. I don't know of many of them that are doing it with any notion that it's a good sword to fight with. Like they want to do it to see if they can, and to see if they can be strong enough to swing that thing around like it's like a sword, right? And that's cool, but by the same token, give those same guys a normally weighted greatsword and watch what they could do, right? Like that's the thing. Like they're doing all this work to be able to move this Buster sword around like it's a reasonable weight. But for all the effort they put into that, if you were like, I want you to fight somebody right now, I bet you the moment that you like took that out of their hand, you put a great, like if you gave them the choice of the two things, the giant Buster sword or an actually correctly weighted greatsword, and told them you have to fight, they're probably gonna take the actually weighted greatsword because like the moment they pick that thing up, it's just gonna be like it's gonna be a blur, right? They're gonna be able to rock that thing, and that's gonna be better, no matter how much weight they've got on the other one. That's gonna be so much better. I mean, the best move for there isn't a best move for a two-handed sword. It's just so Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is coming out like this year. So I'm probably going to do a live stream playing through Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. So like I could go back and play Kingdom Come Deliverance, but number 2 is coming out like imminently. So I'm just gonna do that. Oh yeah, I'm getting Space Marine 2. How expensive is the whole thing? The whole thing, all of my stuff, it's quite expensive now. I haven't even been holding a sword. I want to go back to holding a sword. I miss holding a sword. I've been reading the chat, but I want to hold a sword. So getting started in HEMA is not terribly expensive. Like not relative to other sports or other hobbies or anything. Like the main obstacle to HEMA is the buy-in price. But once you have bought the gear, there's not much in the way of recurring cost. So that's the main thing. You really need a good pair of gloves, a decent sword helps, like, right? I mean, there are ways to get by with less, but you're here to fight with swords. I'm not going to tell you like cheap out on a sword for just to stay in budget, right? Like you're here for sword fighting. Get a sword you're going to actually want to use. But as far as gear goes, I'd say your buy-in price when everything's said and done is probably going to be around 2K. You don't have to get that all at once though, right? You can do stuff. Get a sword, get a mask, get gloves. That would be like under 1,000. You can get mask, gloves, and sword for under 1,000. I would start with that. You know, get your mask, gloves, and swords. Then, as you're working up, you can as you start to build towards stuff that really needs protective gear. That's when you start looking at your jacket, your pad pants if you want them, leg gear, that kind of stuff. That's when you start looking at those. Is once you're ready to like fully commit. That's when the next 1,000 comes in. But once you've done that 2K there's really nothing more for a long time. All that gear is going to last you a while. You're going to get a few years in before you have to buy anything else. I buy a lot of my practice swords through Purple Heart Armory. Hello, Sir Alvin. Greetings. I have a Spanish sword. Would you like to? I have a sword. You're over in Spain. Sir Alvin. This came from Spain. This is made in Toledo. Yeah. There you go. A little piece of Spain over here. Actually, I want to hold my. This did not come from Spain, I don't think. No, that didn't come from Spain. This did. So I have a Spanish right here, and then I have. Where did this come from? I don't know where this came from. I don't actually remember where they're located. Czech? No, it's not Czech. Hey? Hard to say. I just bought it too. I should know where it came from. Can foam swords work for HEMA? Not really. I mean, like, if you have no other options, you can make stuff work, but they're not. Foam behaves very differently from steel. So, like, blunt steel doesn't behave like sharp steel does, but it behaves more like sharp steel than blunt or than foam, right? Foam is foam. Foam works on different rules. This is dumb. Why did I do this? I guess you could do that. That kind of works. When reading a book, some of the stuff that makes me go, this isn't real at all. I mean, so the thing with books is that they're usually, it's the theater of the mind that you're playing for here. And so it's like the sword fight will usually feel as realistic as your mind can concoct. That's kind of the nice thing about book sword fights is it's hard for them to be bad as far as their accuracy because it's like it's on you to like all they have to say is like they're cutting at each other and you're like, okay. If they're trying to do a setting where armor has any semblance of working and they stab through the armor, that's like just like it's like a knight in like full plate or something and he just like stabs him through the breastplate. That something like that would probably be like, hey, that's weird. Unless it's a magic sword, and then okay, sure, whatever. Greetings from Germany. Do I have a German sword? I don't think I have a German-made sword. I'm sorry. I have a German knife somewhere. I don't have any swords made from Germany, though. Geez, society collapses, and I have to bug out right now. I have to grab. I've grabbed time to grab one weapon and one piece of armor. What am I taking? What am I taking? What am I taking? That's a tricky one. I'd probably take a helmet. Helmet's probably a good idea. I think I would take a helmet. Hello, dog. Oh, don't impale yourself on the sword. Come here. No, Rose, no, come back. Come back. Come back. Yeah, come back. There you go. Oh, yes, yes. Yes, she is. Yes, she is. Say hi. Say hi. No, not me. Say hi to them. Say hi to them. No, say hi to them. Yeah. There you go, girl. Oh, I hope you didn't put a hole in my shirt. I think we're okay. Have I ever worn a full suit of armor? Yes. I'm just trying to think about the weapon. I had to bug out right now. I might take one of my smaller swords. I might take that cold steel messer I have. I might take that. It's a little compact thing. It's got a pretty good guard on it. It's got like a knuckle bow. It's got a shell. I might take that. It's beefy. Because you don't know what you're going to need, right? Well, might go with that. Because we're also talking about like if things hit the wall now, right? So like gun, like you could potentially go get a gun or something. So that's on the table. So I'm trying to think of like what. So like pole arm, probably no. I want something that I can keep with me pretty easily. Pole arm's not much use inside of a building, you know. So if I can only have one thing, I'm gonna want something that will work in like tight confine and then still be okay. So I think I'd gravitate towards that messer. I think, or I'd just go grab my actual 1903 French infantry sword from World War One. That thing's pretty small too. I might take that. It doesn't have an edge on it, but it has a point. And it's short-ish, but it's nimble. It's got a good hand. So yeah, it'd be either the messer or that 1903, I think. It'd be one of the two. Although, give me a bit, and I'll just bring my custom sword that I'm ordering. Yeah, give me a little bit, and I'll just grab that one instead. What are my thoughts on incorporating martial arts with swordplay, not just fencing? I mean, we do. I mean, I guess it depends on what you're referring to as martial arts, because we do hand-to-hand type stuff with sword fighting. That's a thing. You know, I've thrown people. You know, you get in. You know, just because you got swords doesn't mean. I forget that I'm not wearing a mic. I talk and I start walking off thinking you can still hear me. But yeah, you know, just because we have swords doesn't mean that you don't get into situations where you can do like hand-to-hand type stuff, right? So I talked about earlier in the stream, being able to like get to here and then coming in, and you can do throws from here. That's a thing. What is the most absurd weapon I've had to face? Somebody, we were simulating rocking a veil. That was kind of absurd. So we were simulating rocking a veil by putting a tennis ball in a sock. So that's how we simulated rocking a veil, but that was ridiculous, fighting that. I have used the katana. How strong do you have to be to do this stuff? Not to do it. Not very. Not really. Not very strong. But it's like you will develop a very particular strength doing sword stuff, and it's not the kind of like musculature you would that helps you with much else. It's a very particular muscle group that you use. So like you don't get like big old guns from fencing. That just doesn't happen. But you build up different strength, right? Like you build up the ability to like hang out down here for extended periods of time, or whatever else, right? You get the glute strength and stuff. Your arms stay kind of noodly. You get like really good wrist strength. You have like I have really beefy thumbs. So you get very specific muscle groups, really well toned, and then all the other stuff just kind of stays whatever. Like pecs, no. Biceps, no. All the stuff like all the markers that people usually look to for strength doesn't happen. You don't get big pecs, you don't get big biceps. You get strong glutes, strong wrists, and like a good back. That's basically it, right? As far as like what people can tell, calves, you get good calves. Yeah, you get pretty strong calves. Dune, I like Dune. I've only read the first book, but I like the first book well enough. The problem for me with Dune is kind of my same issue with like when I'm reading Star Wars stuff, is that the mysticism doesn't do it for me. I like the world building and the like politicking type stuff and the whatever. I like the stuff that doesn't involve the magic, and I don't like the magic-y stuff. So Dune, like Star Wars, I kind of just zone out when you get to the magic-y type stuff. I'm like, I don't care about that. Just talk to me about how the shields, the Holtzman fields or whatever, how the shields work, how the knives work. Tell me how ornithopters work. Tell me about the Spacer Guild, which I know is kind of starting to veer into the Navigators. I know that kind of stuff veers towards the space magic a little bit, but like I'm more interested in that kind of discourse rather than like I had a vision. That's where I'm at. So I found the first half of Dune more engaging than the second half of Dune. I was loving all the Atreides world building stuff. I loved it. I ate it all up. It was so good. And then the plot happened, and I went, whatever. It's not bad. Just who designed the uniform? I don't know. Someone in my club did. I don't know who in my club did it. So this is, I keep saying fencing. Fencing is the art of defense. That's where fencing comes from. It's fencing. Fencing is self-defense. That's right. There you go. There's your etymology history lesson there for the day. So the masters of fence were masters of self-defense. So fencing is just self-defense with swords. So historically, fencing, so if you're doing historical defensing, it can be longswords. It can be whatever. It can be anything, really. So fencing is the term I refer to, but when I say fencing, I do not mean Olympic-style oil, foil, and saber. Oil, foil, epee, foil, and saber. I'm not referring to, but I do mean saber, but I don't mean that saber. And I do mean epee, but not that epee. It's so modern sport fencing has its roots in actual fencing, right? Like that's how this works. Time progresses. The historical fencing eventually mutated to become the modern fencing. This is how timelines work. So foil and epee are derived. They share a common point of the small sword. The small sword has a common point from the rapier. The modern Olympic saber has its common point from military saber. Cavalry, I think it's cavalry because they don't have leg shots. So I think it's specifically based on cavalry systems, if I'm remembering that right. So I believe Olympic saber does not have leg hits because the idea is like it's from a waist up cavalry sword fighting system or something. I'm not entirely sure. Don't quote me on that. But I think that's the root. So it's waist up, like off, like formal military fencing, which is derived from, historical military fencing, derived from any number of sources, whatever you want to look at. And be like, yeah, sword fighting, right? It's cut. Saber's a cut and thrust sword. You can point at anything. Why don't sharp longswords have shilts? Because they don't need them. They don't need them. So the shilt serves two functions. One, you have a skinny blade. The shilt, a skinnier blade than a real sword, than a real sharp sword. Shilt adds mass down near the hand. A blade, because like this thing's the same. I mean, there's some taper here, but like for the most part, like it's just the straight line, right? An actual for realsies sword with a blade is going to have taper. It's going to be like thin up here, and it's going to taper, and then they can play with how much it tapers. But generally speaking, you'll get your thinnest part somewhere around here, and then it's going to beef up and get heavier down here. Mass distribution, you want your point of balance to be there, right thereabouts. So shilt, because we have these skinny blades, fairly uniform blades, shilt puts mass back down here where we need it. So we need that weight down there. So that's one function of the shilt, which is not necessary on a real sword. Secondary function of the shilt, it widens the base. So if I'm trying to do stuff in this area here, like if I'm trying to do thumb grip, and I only have this much space, I'm going to get cracked on the thumb. This is skinnier than the actual sword would be. The shilt gives me room to do the thumb stuff here. Third thing, it's a practice sword. When you're practicing, it just gives you a little bit more there. This is the function that would be most useful on a real sword because it gets the blade to happen further out, but you get that functionality on real swords. I wish I had one that kind of gets the idea across. You can get this functionality from finger rings. So like when you see the little finger ring, that finger rings do the same thing the shilt does as far as that protection. You can get lugs on some swords, like like Zweihanders have lugs doing the same thing. So like that projection in front of the hand, that happens anyways. Like here, right? Look at this. You see? It doesn't look, it's not a shilt, but it's doing the exact thing. Look at that distance. They're almost the same size. Look at that. So like the shilt, the concept of what the shilt's doing does appear on other swords. The problem why you wouldn't want a shilt is other than the mass stuff, like it could be obnoxious to put in a sheath. I mean, there's that one, I guess. I mean, it depends on the shape of the shilt. Some shilts wouldn't be an issue. This one would be kind of obnoxious to put in a sheath, but other shilts you could probably put in a sheath. So I don't really like that point anymore. I retract that point. I think that just depends on the shilt. But those are the main things. Is that there's no room because your actual sword is too wide there anyways. So there's no reason to put a shilt there. And then there are other ways to achieve what a shilt does on a real sword. What time is it? It's almost been 2 hours. I think I'm gonna wrap things up here soon. Do rapiers have a durability problem with how thin they are? Yeah, I mean, relatively speaking, yes, but like not like I know there's a lot of, at least I've heard secondhand of firsthand accounts that rapiers had a tendency to have their tips snap off with some regularity, just because again of how thin they got. So you know, a bad thrust or something, or like a bad hit could potentially like snap the tip off, which isn't a big deal because okay, you lost like an inch or two. Oh, like darn, but it still works. Like you still, a broken tip is still sharp. So like if your tip breaks off during a sword fight, you just have another slightly worse tip to fight. Like you know, it's not pointed anymore, so it's not going to work as well. But it's still sharp. It's still pointy. It'll still stab somebody. You know, it's not the end of the world for it. You still have a shot. Would I rather sit down to write a personal manual or the Second Amendment sword story? I think the Second Amendment sword story would probably be more. I mean, if I could maybe be convinced to do like a gloss. I could do a gloss, I think. So the glosses are where they take where other fencing masters took like the like now Zettel, the recital, and they explained how the like they elaborate on the Zettel, and so the Zettels they're like bullet points, and then their glossing is they take a bullet point and they elaborate on the bullet point, and I kind of feel like I could maybe write a decent gloss. It'd be a lot of regurgitating and stuff, but I think I could maybe do an okay gloss at this point. You seen the shorts of the guys pretending to be medieval knights and stuff with the fake YouTube chat? Yeah, those are pretty funny. What's the funkiest looking sword I have? I don't think I really have a funky looking sword. I have fairly boring tastes when it comes to swords. I don't get anything really weird looking. I've never used a tall war. Be fun. If you went up against a vagrant who has a halberd and you have a long sword, what are your chances if both of us have the same skills in combat? It's I probably give it like 3-to-1 odds. That's probably the odds I'd give. Maybe 2-to-1. Maybe 2-to-1 odds. You know, we're assuming. Oh, there's a little caterpillar. Hello. But yeah, we're assuming 2-to-1 or halberd versus longsword equal skill. I'd give it probably 2-to-1 odds, maybe 3-to-1 odds to the halberd. I think that's reasonable. Two out of three times they'd get you. I think. Yeah, I think I'm fairly confident in giving that. Yeah, two out of three exchanges. I think they would win. So you have to hope that you got the lucky roll on the third there, because you're only going to get the one exchange. You're actually fighting, but yeah, 2-to-1, I think. The sacks, they're cool. I like how they have the edge on the long and it clips in, but not in the way you would think it would. I like that. That's fun. Thank you, Richard. Let's see. You've seen people dressed in heavy plate beating each other up. All the fancy moves go out the window when you're exhausted from fighting for 10 straight minutes and 80-pounder. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like, I don't dispute that. No, exhaustion is a killer. Like, if you are like when your adrenaline's going, and you're tired, and you're hot, yeah, you fight bad. Like, it happens. This is a known thing. You know, the saying is like, you fight your worst at a tournament. You fight your best when you're sparring, kind of like stuff, right? Like when you're just like just messing around with like your buds, that's when you do all your really cool stuff. That's just how it works. The trick here, the reason why you do all the training over and over again, is so that when it hits the fan and you're tired and you're exhausted and you're just like slugging, is that like the all that training is to make your ratio of good fencing to exhausted slug festing. You like when you're just starting out, your ratio of good fencing to exhausted slug fencing is going to be like you're going to have like that much good fencing, that much this much bad fencing. The idea is with all that training is that you can like shift that time period deeper in so that you can stay skillful for longer before the fatigue, the heat, the adrenaline exhaust, like, and then the adrenaline drop. You know, like before all that stuff sets in, you can last and stay skillful longer until all that hits. Right? That's where all that practice is for. Not that you won't eventually succumb to being just a clumsy fighter. That'll happen once you get tired. Once you hit that break point. Okay, that's it. Right? Like, good luck. But yeah, it's about making it last. Also, those SEA, not SEA, but like those Boohurt. I mean, maybe some of the SEA. I'm not quite sure about that, but like especially the Boohurt guys, their armor is like overbuilt. That it's supposed to be. They're using their armor as sporting equipment. Historical armor has different parameters. Historical armor is not as like bulletproof as Boohurt armor. Boohurt armor is meant to just tank and tank and tank. Historical armor is meant to be like wearable for like you need to be able to do a bunch of stuff in your medieval armor. It needs to be the medieval armor there is to let you survive. That's the objective of medieval armor. I survived the fight, not I just got clobbered by a giant steel bar, and you could hit me with that giant steel bar like 50 more times, and I'm going to keep standing, right? Like different parameters. That's a little reductive, I admit, but the reason why I said it's overbuilt, it's heavier than a lot of historical stuff, and then it also like limits because like the Bohart people like they chew through their armor, right? That they put that armor through the meat grinder, it gets mauled. So a lot of them are making do. So their armor doesn't necessarily fit great. It's big, bulky. They're wearing so much padding. Like they're like compared to like high-end medieval and Renaissance armor and stuff. Like they're basically like toddlers for all the mobility they have relative to like super high-end armor. Of course, not everyone was wearing super high-end armor. I'm not saying that either, but there are accountable factors of why the fighting you're seeing in those videos looks the way it does. Hello, Crow. I do like grilled cheese, yes. Do I think Highlander Superior lights are accurate? I think conceptually they're fine. The idea of his, I assume like we're talking about like him going like boom like that. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, if you're in half sword, you can do that, sure. Him doing it as an opener feels a little strange. I don't usually start a sword fight by shortening my reach, because that's what he does. That's what he's doing. Is like my sword's this long. If I go to here, my sword is now this long. Why would I do this? Especially as an opener. That part's silly. Why would I open like that? Sometimes people will like try to like do it and they'll try to like get in there. Like maybe they want to get in, they want to make that close happen. But in the context of how Highlander fights, it's silly, right? Like if you're doing if you're opening with that half swording, it's because you're trying to get in really fast, really close, and take the fight there. Highlander's combo is that he does the close in fight, and then he goes back to the long distance fight. And it's a weird way to progress through the fight. You'd want to end between the two, you would normally start fighting long and then fight in. It's weird to go backwards. Not like impossible, just weird. Thank you. I like the house too. Anyone want to see the pergola? I'm so proud of the pergola. It's really cute up there. I might go up there. Yeah. How are we doing? Okay, yeah, I'm gonna cut it at 2 hours. I think I've been streaming long enough at 2 hours. I'm also hungry. It's dinner time. Snap Dude, hey, welcome. Hey, I love like saying things in the stream and then I catch up with the chat and then I find that somebody was trying to answer somebody else's question and they answered in the same way I answered it. That's pleasing. What else do I want to play with? I got 4 minutes left in the stream here. Yeah, I will show off the pergola before I go. Yeah, definitely. I'm very proud of the pergola. I will show it off before I go. But let's see. We're gonna say 4 or 3 minutes left on the clock without the pergola, or not counting the pergola. I could do some sword stuff. I was playing around earlier with a particular play. It goes like boom, boom, boom. Yeah, like kind of there. There we go. 1 there. So it does a flick as a feint. So they cut the Overh. So there's a first step here that I'm kind of skipping. This sword starts here. It goes chop. Okay, so it's cutting at my head right now. Freeze frame. It's cutting at my head. What do? I zwerk under it. Boom. We've made a bind. From here, I flick my short towards their head. They don't want to get hit by that, so they parry the flick. I say, cool, that's what I was planning on. And I come through, I hit, and I come through like that. That's that play. The mosquitoes are coming out. Would I ever consider teaching people? I think teaching people virtually would be very challenging. That's not something, maybe someday, but it's really hard to teach fencing normally. Like there's so many little details. Like when I'm teaching fencing, I am like circling, right? I'm trying to watch from every angle, and I need to do it without making people like. I just need to be able to do that. I don't see a good way to. Maybe if like VR gets really good, and like we get like full motion, like I could get like maybe if we had a full motion tracking type scenario, I could maybe do it. I think. But I would just question the value of any teaching I could do from a webcam. I love that one. That one's so much fun. Getting down here and just boom. You get the catch, you get the thrust. Oh, I love it so much. Yeah, it's a good parry hit, right? I've pulled this off in sparring with some regularity. So it either doing this as a defensive stroke will either catch their blade, like if they're cutting down at you, and you come up like this. I have found that it will either catch their blade and stick them, or you do it deeper and you cut their arms as their arms are coming down, and you just boom. And their arms get stuck because you just came and cracked up under their arms. Yeah, yeah, you definitely need to disclaim it. All right, that's about the 2-hour mark there. Also, really like Shield How, by the way. I love Shield How. It's so good. Shield How, amazing. It's you just full just boom. It blasts through parries so well because you catch them. The reason why the Shield How blasts through is because you're catching up here on the weak where it's easy to move somebody around, right? Up here is easy. Down here, not so easy. Up here, easy. So you're going here, you're catching weak, and then you are strong arming it, right? So this isn't like cutting here. This is cutting out. So you're using your sword to create this wall. Right? You're putting your whole body. Like what I'm structurally doing here is this. I'm shoving like this, but I'm doing it turned. So I make contact on the weak. I shove down the center of my body where I'm strongest, and you carry it through to hit the target. I love it. Shield How's amazing. Anywho, let's see. I promised pergola. So we're gonna go. Hi, Gendrya, Fluffle Buns. You're a channel member, and I'm so sorry, but I'm trying to wrap up the stream. But you're a channel member, so this is I'm giving you a perk right now. If there's one thing you want before I end the stream, one thing you want to know, ask it. You deserve that as a channel member. But other than that, I'm wrapping up the stream soon. I'm fulfilling a last request aside from you, that people wanted to see my new pergola. So we're gonna go check out the pergola. While I try to grab swords off the deck, trying to save myself some travel time. How did I get started with this? I wanted to do fencing in college, and the fencing club was defunct in college. So I was very sad. And then I did some boffer fighting, and I didn't like it very much. But it was better than nothing. And then I found out that there's a HEMA club in the area. So I started doing, I went out to the HEMA club, Triangle Sword Guild, and that was like 10 years ago. And I'm still doing it. So that's where I'm at. Okay. Are you all ready for this? I'm so proud of this pergola. We built this, let's see, about like 2 weeks ago. Okay, here. Wait, okay, ready? Okay, pergola. Isn't it so cozy? It's so cozy. What's the longest handle length before a sword becomes a polearm? Oh, interesting. That's a good one. Gosh, before it becomes a. So it's kind of like a relativity thing for me. I think there is. I think you could have the same handle length, but if the blade got shorter, then at a certain point, it would become a polearm. I think so. Like, yeah, I like those are the sun sails we have, and then this is a fire pit, by the way. This thing right here. We have the cover on it right now, but that's a fire pit. Would it be a ratio of handle to blade length? Yeah, but I do feel like there's a length at which it would become. No, yeah, I think that'd be like there's a gray area I think where there's just I just can't say, but I would say it's a ratio of handle to blade length. Anything where the blade is longer than the handle. Gosh, but I don't know if I like that either. This is a tough one. Because I was gonna say anything where the blade length is longer than the handle, I would call a sword. But I feel like there is a like really long blade with a pretty long handle here that I would definitely still call a pole arm, even if the blade was longer. I'm just gonna like give you a ballpark. You know, the best answer I can give you is I'd say that. I'd say that. Longer than this, it's a pole arm. There you go. Yeah. Longer than that, and it becomes a pole arm. There you go. Don't ask me how wide that is. You're just gonna have to guess. I should do a video from the pergola at night with the fire. You're right. I should do that, or maybe I do a live stream from the pergola.
You have to bring stuff out.
Hi. My wife. Welcome, wife. I was showing off the pergola.
It looks so pretty in the camera. Oh my god.
Right? It looks really cute. Yeah.
So pretty.
Yeah, it looks so. Yeah.
Figured flowers need a little bit of sun.
Hello, live stream. So good. Relax. Yeah, the stream was good. Yeah, it's been 2 hours. I need to have dinner. So thank you for joining me, everybody. I'm gonna keep getting sucked back in if I keep answering people. I'm so sorry. This is where I get stuck. This is how I got stuck for an extra hour, right? I was only gonna do it for like an hour.
This is what happens.
This is what happens. I get sucked in. Yeah. Thanks for everybody for joining me, and then I will wrap things up there. Cool. Have a good one, everybody, and have a good Mother's Day tomorrow. Bye.